you know, we did a lot of, you know, Stone did all the paperwork, but everybody was in combat, you know, and whether you were a first sergeant or whatever, you know, you were doing, you were part of the combat units. And if you wanted to sit back, that's the reason I got all shot up. If you wanted to sit back there and do the paperwork and didn't have to be up front, then you wouldn't have to worry about it. And I think that these guys that are out there all the time, and then the guys that tell the greatest war stories, is like that song of the Green Beret. Did you hear that one? And the guy that talks about all these, you know, paratroopers back in the garrison, you know, tell all these war stories. And some of the guys that are set back in the farthest in the division, where the corps have all the war stories they've heard from somebody else.
Mm.
You know, it's like.
Well, just tell me in 25 words or less why you don't like war stories.
Why bring up something that's in the past?
Do you think there's anything that can be learned from it?
It might be, but you know, I think if somebody's going to read those, how many today this young generation reads anything about the war stories? Does anybody really like that?
Do you think there's anything to be gained?
I don't think so. Maybe there is, but you know, it's like Kerry brings out his silver stars, you know, his silver star. I got 2 of them. What good are they?
Well, what does it say about you that you earned them?
No, nobody really cares.
Well, what do you think it says about you that you earned them?
Well, I know, but I'm not going out and tell everybody that, you know, the same way with all the rest of the decorations. But what good really in today? It's nice to have, right? I can say, well, I have them. You wear them on your dress blues that I have and so on and so forth. But is it really important to this new generation? I don't know.
I mean, being decorated was its own reward, I suppose, and doing what you did was its own reward.
Right. For me, own personal reward, yes, it is. And a lot of people today appreciate that, and I understand that. But normally, you know, it's one of those things that happens. Like the war stories, I can tell you stories, you know, are a disaster, you know. I don't think the war stories, I think the stories they're not half as bad as they were in Korea. You know, what we went through. We went through brutal stuff over there, but, you know, this trouble we got in Korea, that was absolutely a disaster.
Now, you brought up a good point. Now, do you think a lot of what happened to the 10th Mountain Division during World War II is sensationalized?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so at all. Because you look today at, they keep bringing up the Navy SEALs, which Kerry was in, and that's always brought up. And no, I don't think so. Definitely not.
Do you think it was glamorized? Do you think the 10th Mountain Division was glamorized during World War II? And do you think it's sort of glamorized in hindsight?
I think it's glamorized more now than it was in World War II.
In what way do you think it was glamorized?
Because you know, they were the first into Bosnia, they were first into Afghanistan, and that's brought up a lot of times. You know, I watch the news, weather, and sports, the rest of the stuff. I don't even, maybe a football game. But I think that it's more brought to light now than it was in the past.
How about the original 10th Mountain? Do you think that has been glamorized as time has gone by?
Yes, I think so, definitely, because there's a lot of people, you know, they write the books and they do this, but I think it's a good thing also. I think that's a good thing, because I think if people are interested in that, and I don't know what the sales are on these books, you know, I have no idea, but I think that if you bring that up, and if people are interested in it, it brings up what we really did and whether we did it in the 10th Mountain Division, because nobody else has ever accomplished that in Italy, is what we did in Italy. And nobody else, I'll back up, nobody else was trained to do that. That was a big point. What other division in the Army was ever trained to do that? None. Airborne couldn't have dropped in there. There's no way, because it had been shot out of the sky like a duck. And there was no other division could have done that, let's face it, and I know that. And we were trained to do that, and we knew what the consequences were when we went in there. And I think that it should be, and I don't think that any other division today will be trained. I don't think, where else is there a division that can be trained like we trained? The 10th Mountain Division, this young 10th Mountain Division, is a great division. But the training we had compared to the training they're getting now, there isn't any place.
Would you wish your training on them?
Yes, I wish they'd go through that. Yes, I do. I wish I would like to see them take that same training. This young generation, yes.
What do you think can you sort of guess what would be the outcome? What would they learn? And what would you want them to learn?
I would hope they learn to be self-disciplined, and I hope there be a lot of leaders come out of that unit, because I look at our division now, the people that come out of there that are in high offices and have been in high offices, and I hope that they learn that, a lot of self-respect, and to carry on the name of division that was forerunner to them.
How much do you think the original 10th Mountain was a product of the times?
I think we were before our times at that time, because I think we were before our time because that's the reason who wanted us. They had no place for us to go. And that's when General Hay finally said, okay, I'll take it. But I think we were before our time, definitely so.
And how about the soldiers of the 10th, how much of the personal characteristics and values and ideals and valor, things that are all integral to a person's personality, how much of that was a product of the times? Who those people were before they went in and what they became as a product of it?
I think that's a good question also. I think that those people that came in there were better people and better trained and were better citizens than when they came in there, because they learned something, not to be individuals, because I saw so many individuals come in there. They learned to be a people rather than an individual. Definitely so.
Okay, now the Army's...
Talk about it,
But the trouble is, you don't want them to make up any new material, like enhancements.
No,
You know what I mean?
that's true, that's true. But then those guys, there's a lot of them, as I said, it's like Bob Dole, there's a lot of senators and governors and were out of the 10th Mountain Division. But then you look at these people, a few of them, that yak and go on and on and on about it. What have they really done in civilian life? What did they do? And they're living on the reputation of the 10th Mountain Division, of people that really did it, and they wish they had done it, and they didn't do it. I've seen that a lot too.
Well, on balance, would you say most of the soldiers that came out of the 10th led highly productive lives?
Oh yeah, definitely so. Oh yeah, definitely so. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely so.
War stories aside?
War stories aside, those war stories. Yeah, they're, as I said before, you can sit around and tell war stories all day long. But the human interest story, that's, I just don't, I just don't see, some guy, they dug a foxhole up here and we just did up this and so on. We climbed up here and we did that. I can tell you a war story just like shot that colonel, that major, but why go on and on in the same way with the other people I shot, but why do that?
Well, how do you feel about being held up as being like an inspiration to the current 10th?
No, I hope we are. I hope we are. You know, what we went through, and as I said previously, they have never gone through. They're probably in Afghanistan was tougher than anything they've been into, period. And they have never had the training that we have had. And the first thing I heard on the news, and I read it in the paper, in Time magazine or someplace, and all the frostbite they had. Holy mackerel. We had frostbite too, but not when they were talking about all the frostbite they had, and the equipment, all that equipment should have been there. God, they had the best equipment in the world, and I look at their equipment compared to what we had, and I would say one thing, probably some of them didn't know how to use it. That, I think, the training we had, we knew how to use the equipment we had, and the foot gear we had, and the sleeping bags we had, and all that. But I don't think this stuff was shipped into them after the fact. Now, that's what I read. And I think this stuff was shipped into them, and the training they had they didn't have that training. Mm-hmm. That's what I think. And I read that between the lines. They didn't know how to use it.
Right. Well, they're coming out of a different place, different set of training.
Oh yeah, definitely so.
But do you see the value at all of war stories to the next generation who are looking for a model, looking for an inspiration?
Oh sure, I understand that. But it's interesting to see what happens today with these kids. But you know, I look at too, Abby, I look at these people, the National Guard people, and these reserves that are in the Army, and they all drew this paycheck every month, and all of a sudden, the taxpayers, you and me, are paying those, and all of a sudden they have to go to war, and they have no training. They're dry land training with no real training, because I know that the training with the National Guard and Reserves, I see them in training, and down at Fort Devens, I see was the training they had, and then they didn't know how to use equipment. And then when they go overseas, and they think it's a horrible thing, it's 8 or 9 months overseas. I was looking at my records the other day, I was digging them out, and I had 65 months overseas, and that's a long time. But I didn't regret it, because I signed up for it, and that's what I did. Right. But I expected that, if they wanted to. I never turned down an assignment any place, but I see these people today in the reserves and National Guard. They're going out there and they're all upset because they have to go to war. I wonder what they thought they were in there for.
Well, would you say it's a different world?
A different world, and I understand that. It's a different society today, and I understand that. But that's the reason I was wondering, on this, the kids in Bosnia, the 10th Mountain Division over there. Their attitude, they're at the regular Army unit. Aren't they all volunteers over there right now?
Well, the ones that are out on the fire bases are, yeah. There's certainly plenty of National Guard over there.
I know, but I mean, within the 10th, are they integrated within the 10th, the National Guards that come in?
National Guard there.
They are, huh?
Right in there.
Right.
Doing their best. I had your speech on no war stories. So we're not going to do war stories, but I do want your personal perspectives on different parts of what happened to you in Italy, and what happened and how you did it and how you felt about it at the time. First thing I want to know is, tell me your perspective on, do you think combat is a great equalizer when you take a unit into battle? You have these people from diversity of background. Yes, they all have a love of the outdoors and terrific training, but how does that play out in battle, and would you say combat is an equalizer?
No, I think so, definitely so. I think that it's an equalizer because you look around and all this training you did, what are you going to do with it now? Are you going to learn from the experience you had and all the lectures you had, what's going to happen to you in combat? And can you put up with what you learned and all the hard training and the lectures and what you were told? Somebody's going to die. And are you going to put that in perspective with the training you had and the lectures you had, and how are you going to equalize that out? And something's going to happen to you or somebody else and around you, and that's exactly what happened. And I think that the day that you think that you are not vulnerable for that bullet's coming by is the day you're going to get hit.
Well, how about if you tell me a little bit about what happened to you during the Mount Belvedere action?
Well, it's...
What did you have to do, and how did you do it?
Well, I think that probably, you're like any other infantryman. You're out there, and even the first sergeant and the rest of it, you leave the administration people behind in the office, and you're out there with the troops. And that's another man, and so when you're out there fighting with the rest of them, you're leading, all the training you had and telling them you're the leader, and you set the example for the troops, and rather than staying back in your headquarters, then you're out there with the troops showing them what to do and how not to do it, you hope, and continue to be with one of the people, whether the rank you have, it doesn't matter, and so you out there hoping that you're inspiration to the people that you've been preaching to for 2 years of not to do and how to do it and not to do it. And I think that and that's when you probably could get yourself in trouble with it. But I was out there because I was one of the people, not one of the guys that stayed behind.
Well, tell me a little bit about what you did during the Mount Belvedere action. Like, kind of run me through it. I mean, I wasn't there. Tell me what happened.
Well, I was out there with the people, and we were doing our thing of firing weapons, and you got an objective to take, and our objective we were doing it, and so I was out there with all the rest of the troops doing our thing, fighting.
What was your objective, and how did you accomplish it?
Objective, we were supposed to take, I don't know, I can't even remember, some hill, and we were supposed to accomplish that hill, take that, and so I continued to march with them.
Now, was that your first exposure to battle?
Right, that's the first time. But it was, you learned a lot the first time, I'll tell you. It was the first time those bullets start flying over your head, and those mortars or those 88s come in, maybe there's one of those on your back out there. And you better get down, keep your head down. If you're going to dig a hole, you better dig a hole and continue. But you forget a lot of things when out there. That's to separate the men from the boys when the action starts, and the leadership that you've learned, you hope you've learned, continues to drive forward and accomplish what you're supposed to.
Now, as 86L moved along the base of Belvedere, can you sort of describe to me what the action was for you?
Well, the action, L Company we were on the left flank of the battalion. I think we were on the left flank of the battalion. And our objective was to take that part of the mountain up there, and we were advancing, and so some of the radio communication wasn't like it is today, and some of the companies would get behind them. I think we were in reserve finally, and but from there I don't.
When you came out of reserve, what was the action that you faced?
Well, when we came out of reserve, then one of the other companies by, and then we were the lead company.
And as lead company, what happened?
Well, that's the first time I got hit, that's right. And so then I was evacuated back to the aid station, and then finally I took some of the shrapnel on me, and then I went back up in the line again.
Tell me a little bit about being hit. What exactly led up to being hit? And
I got hit with an airburst.
And describe kind of what your wounds were.
Well, something on my head here, and my arm still got shrapnel in my chest here, and I got hit in the arms. I was in a 88 airburst hit me, and so it's a hot lead.
Now, was this early on in Belvedere, Alaska? Was this later on towards Delatorage?
Yeah, this is later on in Delatorage, right?
What do you remember about Delatorage?
I can't remember much, you know.
Do you think there's a reason you don't remember much?
No, I don't. It was a tough battle, but I don't remember much, no.
Do you remember much? Did it seem like an extraordinary amount of resistance you were facing?
Oh yeah, right, definitely so. We were facing a lot of resistance at Delatorage, and oh yeah, and you know, we'd lost a lot of men there, and so, but there was heavy fire because there were a lot of airbursts in there.
Were you surprised by how much resistance there was?
Yes, I was. We were surprised. I think everybody was surprised at that time, definitely so.
And was it a matter of how intense the resistance was, or was it a matter of the duration and intensity?
I think the duration and the intensity of the thing was definitely so.
How long for you was it real intense?
I don't know.
Can you remember like how the whole thing started? And
No, you know, you remember going out and you remember what's happening all the time, but I can remember, I don't know how many people we lost. I remember there's quite a few, but it just, I don't know, I can't remember a lot of stuff that happened. I guess maybe I didn't want to remember.
a battle is very chaotic. Is it possible that all of it wasn't right in front of you? I mean,
Well, that was, you know, all that's right in front of you all the time, but then you keep going, and then I don't know. I just
are you
forget.
so focused on going forward that maybe everything that's happening to you at a certain moment doesn't sink in?
Whoa, well, you know, one thing about it, the only thing you're worrying about is how many people you're going to lose and to take care of yourself. You know, that's the biggest thing. I was worried more about the troops that I was losing, and I know I was losing some of them, and also what I'm going to do with myself also. If I get hit and then get evacuated, then what's going to happen to the people who's going to take care of them? Of course, you know, that's what you're trained for also. There's somebody else who can always take your place, whether it's in the Army or the job, there's always somebody that can take your place.
On Delatorage, when you knew you were losing people, were you faced with circumstances where there was something you could do?
No, there's nothing you can do. The only thing you do is I was worried about whether they were KIA or they were wounded, so we could get them back and take the people back that were wounded, and also the ones not to leave anybody out there. You know, that was a big problem that I was concerned about, everybody, because these people you trained with for all this time, and so then all of a sudden you're losing a lot of them.
What was the most difficult situation you faced at Delatorage?
Probably when we were pinned down. You know, then we were pinned down, and that's probably when I got my weapons there, you know. So then we were pinned down, and that P-51 came in and strafed it, and that's when we took that ridge ahead of us. I think I have the citation someplace, and took that ridge, and so that's when this major got up, and it was him or me, and he was only, as I said, a few yards away, and so it was him or me. So I shot him, and that's where I got those medals. But,
Now, this is before you were wounded, right?
yeah, right.
I heard you were a terrible patient.
Probably.
Let's
Probably.
put it this way. You were sent back to recuperate.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to stay in bed?
No. Why stay in bed? You die in bed. No, I don't know. No, I was horrible. I wanted to get back. You know, it's interesting. You talk about that back station. Here was a guy in there. They sent me in this back station. Here was a guy who had appendicitis. And I said to him, I said, "How long you been in this place?" He said, 8 days. Can you imagine somebody with appendicitis being in bed for 8 days back there? That I always remember. No, I was a horrible patient. I wanted to get back to the troops.
You know, you spent all this effort on, especially as first sergeant, you spent all this time, you know, bringing the level of the troops up, you know, in training and you know, supervising them and encouraging them to be the best they could be. Once you got into battle, how did you feel about, there's so much stuff you can't control?
That's right. You know, I looked around, excuse me, I looked around and I said, all the training we did, and I had all the control. And everything, even when around problems out there, you had that control because you could get up and yell at them and say, do this and do that. But out there, there's, you might say, chaos. Let's face it, you know. It's everybody's fighting, and there's no, you want to go out there and help everybody, but there's no control you really have. You know, everybody there's control and they're all disciplined. They know what they're supposed to do and you're doing it, but then when something unknown happens, then what are you going to, how much control do you really have? Because you're exposing yourself, and then you expose yourself to the point, then what good are you back to the hospital?
So what do you do about that feeling?
Nothing more, you just hope. You hope that, you know, that everything comes out in your way and their way. You're worried about them more than you are yourself. And, but there's nothing you really do about it. You just hope that everything comes out the way you hoped it would be.
Well, what really got you personally through some of those really tough spots?
Discipline. You know, I think little things you learned, you know, and you go to all the schools you want, and you take the important part out of it that you have learned, and put that to your own thinking, and this is what you're going to do. I think that everything that I learned and the discipline I have, and I still have that discipline today, you put that to work, and hope that the people that you've taught in the past, whether it was at Camp Hale or Camp Swift or wherever, that they use that same idea, the discipline that you learned, they learned, and I hope they put it to use for themselves and think. Sometimes it's hard to think. That everything's hot on you, but I think that helps you come out of it, definitely so.
How much of it is training? How much of it is just intuitiveness? How much of it is just resourcefulness?
Oh, I think there's probably 50% of it's training or more, and also your self-discipline and the resources you've learned and put it all to use. Definitely so. The training you have, you can continue to grow on that training. You know, take the good part of the training and grow on that training.
Now, as first sergeant, did you ever feel sort of, I don't want to say conflicted, but here you were responsible for all these guys, you know, and especially you gotten to know them all well during all the years of training, and you were close with them, and then you get on the field, and you know the best thing you can do is be tough. Did you ever feel like a little conflicted over, you know, you want to be compassionate, but on the other hand, you know your job is to be tough?
That's right. You know, you get compassion with it, but the discipline you have and to be tough with them, get tough with them. You know, this is where you have to learn to be the discipline you've been taught, and I hope that it's been brought into your mind that you can continue to do that. I think so. Yeah, I never let up on them. There was no way that I would let up on them because I think it was for their own benefit.
Did you ever feel like you had a split personality over it?
No, not really. No, not really. I was compassionate. I definitely, so like they used to say, why don't you have more compassionate? Well, maybe I have, but not, I wouldn't show it. That's right.
Maybe you are now.
Yeah, right.
You want to stop for one sec?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll make sure you were going somewhere. Okay.
You want to just use your question? I mean, that's...
No, go ahead, do what you wanted to do.
Okay, well, I wanted to ask a little bit about how you earned your first medal, since we were talking about dell'Iteratia.
When I shot those clowns, I took those prisoners too. Besides him, I think there was 8 or 10 of those guys were with him, and I took those and gave them back. I think it's in that book or someplace, in that citation. And so I took those guys and turned them over and back to I don't know where they went to. Definitely, so I don't know that.
So
The right place, the right time, I guess.
So when the major... Oh, there were prisoners as well at that same...
Right.
Well, wait, can you just describe the whole thing from the beginning, that whole little episode?
Well, we were pinned down up there, and I remember this plane came in, and somebody, Ford Observer someplace, called for this plane come in and strafe these people, and so they jumped out of their foxhole. They were up on the hill. So we were advancing up there, and so they were going to shoot us, and so I said, well, I'll shoot you first. And so I shot him, and then the rest of them gave up. That was easy. So.
And the result of this was what kind of medal?
A Silver Star. But at the right place, the right time, the wrong place, the wrong time.
Well, do you feel like you used up one of your 9 lives on that?
Yeah, probably. That was yeah. I never thought of that. No, it's.
How many lives did you use up in the 10th?
A couple, but that's.
How about if you tell me just a little bit about what really attracts you to war or being in the Army?
No, I loved it. I loved it. Number one is I loved the Army because it gave me, coming out of a small town in Idaho, it was, it gave me a chance to travel the world. And it's like everything else, you got out of what you put into it, and I put a lot into it and got a lot out of it, and it gave me an opportunity to grow, and it gave me an opportunity to do something useful, and it gave me an opportunity that, to defend this country. At that time, we were at war, and I wanted to do something. And I think it was a privilege to do it on my part, and let me do that. But the combat was exciting, and I don't deny that. It was something. It was a challenge. I like a challenge out there, and it was a challenge for me to do that. And I think it also gave me an opportunity to live and see what other people do and what their environment, the environment that I came out of in a small town, and the environment that I lived in, and the environment that other people, and it gave me an opportunity to see how other people lived in the environment they came out of, whether it was rich or wealthy or poor, or I met a lot of great people who were very poor, and I read a lot of very influential people. But the environment that the Army gives you, how many people, you gotta, in the world, do you get contact with as you do within, at Camp Hale or a regiment or a battalion or even a company, the different personalities. You can learn off of that whole program. I think it was fantastic. As I said before, the Army's, these kids are talking about wanting to go in the Army. The sky's the limit. You can do anything you want to do in the Army. And you get out exactly, and repeat myself 100 times, exactly get out of it what you put into it, and nothing else. You don't want to put anything into it, you don't have to do it. The promotions are great today, and the education is unbelievable.
Well, as much exposure as you had to different kinds of people, different kinds of American soldiers, what was your impression of the Italians, and what kind of sense did you get back from the Italians about what the Americans and what the 10th was doing?
No, the Italians, they were probably our best friends over there. God, they weren't they were very good soldiers, let's face it, I hate to say that, but they were not very good soldiers. But they were great friends, they were great personality, and they were willing to help us all the time. That was one thing about them, God. They were something else. And the environment that we were living in, they wanted to do everything. They opened up their wine cellars, and we had wine in the mess hall and wine out in the chow lines. But they were very gracious people. I liked them. They were great. Even when I was in Austria, went down to their school in Austria, their Italian school and the Alpini school. They were great. They were the Italians like us. They did at that time, and I'm sure they still do.
When you think about how much teamwork is required to be an effective Army, and then you think about what you accomplished after the war, which, well, it was a team environment, say in Vail, a lot of it was also driven by your own personal, what you brought to it.
Right.
Does it seem like you brought more individual, after the war, were you less team-oriented or more team-oriented? Or it seemed like a lot of your success has to do with you individually.
Well, that's a good question on that. I was reading a evaluation that I had, one of my bosses gave me. He didn't like me at all. He came from IBM, and he's one of the other guys that came in on this rotation of owners and ownerships and all the rest of it. So I was reading, in fact, I was going to send this evaluation to him, and Rose said, no, don't do that. And so he wrote down that I wasn't a team player, but he didn't like me personally, which is all right. I don't expect all the bosses to like me. And he said I wasn't a team player at all. I was too individual oriented, and I thought too much on my feet, and was discipline towards myself and not other people, which was a lot of it was hooey, but that's all right. I could care less about it. But probably in some respect I was right, because I had a goal that I wanted to attain myself, because I know what Peter wanted, and Parker was the propaganda minister up there, the marketing guru, and we were building something, and I had a lot of ideas that I just did. I wasn't, in those respects, I wasn't really a team worker, but when it come down to really getting the job done, I realized that it took a lot of people to do that. But when I had an idea, I had to do that in the Army too many times. When I had an idea, I wanted to see if I could push my idea through without going through this layer of people. And so that boss of mine brought that out, which was probably true, but I had a goal that I wanted to attain. But when it came down to all the work we were doing, I had a lot of people working for me, and the people, my managers and directors that were under me, I ran a lot of this stuff by them ahead, but I did a lot of the thinking before, which is true. That's right.
Well, it's an interesting combination, What sort of examples do you think you set? I know you set the bar high. You're always really aware of trying to be the best you could be. What kind of example did you set?
I think that, as people said, I set an example that was hard to follow, because I worked 7 days a week. I was there at 4 or 4:30 every morning at that office, because the gondola had to start up at 5 o'clock, and the food had to go up the mountain. And I wanted to be sure that gondola was started, and to go up there. And I set that goal, and they knew, those employees knew that I would be there. And so that goal that I set for those guys, they knew that that gondola's bull wheel better be turning at 5 o'clock in the morning. And sooner or later it became just a routine habit.
Now, after you recovered, or after you escaped from the hospital, after Della Traccia, you went back with your unit, and what was the next significant battle that you faced?
No, I don't even remember. I don't know.
Well, how about as you approached the Po? You remember what happened?
Oh yeah, right. Oh yeah. That's where I got hit the last time, was in the Po, and I was out there. And in fact, a kid named Norman Goldberg was a medic that picked me up out in the Po.
What happened before you got hit?
Well, I was out there pushing the troops. I was out there with the troops. We were advancing out in the Po Valley. And I was out there with the troops, and I was way out front with them. And I got this shot up there, and I got another air burst. And so that time it took me out. And Norman Goldberg from New York, he was the medic. And he took me back, and I remember that. That was it. And so then I got out of the hospital again. And so then I was assigned to the back unit, the quartermaster corps, and then the war was over with.
How did you feel about being out with the troops?
Oh, I wanted to. I wanted to be out with the troops all the time, definitely so. Oh yeah, there was no, you're there, you train them all these years, and being out with them all the time. Why sit back at company headquarters or battalion headquarters, seeing the paperwork? Anybody can do that.
Where did you feel your job was?
Out with the troops. Definitely so.
Stand by. I got a couple more goodies for you. You want to pause for a sec?
Yeah.
I know you had a lot of guys you had to supervise, but I mean, what can you sort of tell me that you remember about Stuart?
Well, I remember Stuart. Oh yes, I remember Stuart. I think probably Stuart, he didn't really like very much discipline. Stuart was he was a free spirit. If I remember about Stuart, he was always looking for bugs and leaves and all kinds of different stuff. And so he was a wanderer. I always remember Stuart. Oh yeah, you never forget Stuart. He was a nice guy, but he was about as much soldier as I was an aviator. He didn't like that discipline at all, period. He didn't like discipline at all. And as I said before, a lot of people don't like discipline. And I was surprised when he came into the company. I was surprised that he ever volunteered to, coming out of Chicago, and I think that's where he was from, wasn't it, Chicago? Coming out of Chicago, volunteered for the mountain division at Camp Hale, Colorado. I was surprised he didn't go down to Fort Benning, Georgia, or down into, Fort Leavenworth or Fort Bragg or some.
Well, he could have transferred out, and he even did, but he transferred back in. Can you make a guess why?
I don't know. That's probably a good question.
No, I think he missed everybody.
Probably that's it. I don't know. All the harassment probably, because I harassed everybody. Maybe he harassed, but I don't know. That was a good question.
We went out to learn electronics, but he transferred back in because he missed everybody.
Well, it's interesting, but it was. I don't know why. He was a bug hunter and a leaf looker and so on and so forth.
Do you have any recollections about on maneuvers? Anything stand out about him on maneuvers?
Oh yeah, he was a wanderer. He wandered every place. He wanted to go every place, and he was. Oh yeah, I remember him very well. Big, tall, lanky kid. Oh yeah, I remember Stuart very well.
Let's see. Pause for a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Division.
Oh, I loved it. It was an elite division. I liked something different. It was the only one in the Army. Oh, I loved it. I loved the camaraderie in it. The people that were in it, they were a different breed of cat. And you got in a straight leg outfit. They were all draftees, the majority of them. And most of those people up at Camp Hale in the early years were all volunteers. In the later years to fill up, we got, we were put in there. But, this the Big Red One and some of the other divisions themselves, it was, this was a volunteer outfit. And that's what I liked. That's the reason probably the Airborne attracted me, because it was all a volunteer outfit. Rather than be just drafted and put into some unit or be assigned to some unit, then I wasn't interested into it. This was entirely different. It was elite, let's face it. Anybody likes it, I did.
How do you think the 10th Mountain Division made a difference in World War II?
I think it made all the difference in the world in Italy. I don't know how much difference it made any place else, but I think in Italy it made all the difference in the world. I think that what we did in Italy was outstanding, because I think that'll be remembered forever, because nobody else could accomplish that. A lot of people looked at it, but nobody did that.
Now, as hard as you guys fought in Italy, do you also feel that you had a role as nation builders or as sort of ambassadors of the American way in your contacts with the Italian people?
Oh, I think so, definitely so. We were with the Italian people, and I think that, they loved us. We were probably the first real people we had right with them all the time. I always remember when they opened up their wine cellars.
Did you feel a responsibility as an American to, have a certain sense of kindness or generosity?
Oh, sure, definitely. That's the problem with American GI today. They're too compassionate with probably even the people they're fighting. Oh yeah, definitely. The Italians they were good. I didn't have any problems with them.
Can you think of anything else to add that we haven't touched on?
Well, don't you think, as far as an oral history,
Yeah, sure. Well, I can start that. When I went up to, I volunteered. Every place normally I went, I volunteered. They weren't ever taken. So when I went up to, even in Austria, I went up to Austria because they started mountain. John Hay was commander up there in Austria. And so, I kept contact with Colonel Hay all this time. So they started a mountain training cell up at Saalfeld in Austria. And so I volunteered and got shipped up there and went there at Saalfelden, and we trained. We had Bergführers for instructors. The Germans, they were Bergführers. They were in the German army. This Heinz Seitner was a colonel in the German army, and they were great instructors, and they taught us mountaineering, really, technical mountaineering, and so that was great training for me, and that's when I won the International Army Championships in Europe, because we had a ski team out of there, and they gave us the privilege of training a lot, which was great, and they had great instructors. So we won everything in useful, and then went on from there when they had the championships. But then that was great training for me, and then I went to Alaska, and that was great. And we had training. That was a different training. We had rock climbing and skiing up there, but also we had river training. And we trained NATO troops that come into Alaska, and that was different. You had the kilts come in and so on and so forth, and that was great. A good opportunity from there. And then I went to Dartmouth, and they started a mountaineering program at Dartmouth College, and so I was picked out of. They wanted me to stay up at Fort Greely, and they didn't. I wouldn't stay there. I had 2 years of that. That was enough. And so, because they tried to start a biathlon team, and they wanted me to start that for them down at Fort Rich in Alaska, up to Alaska, out of Fort Rich. So I didn't want to do that, so I came back and was signed to Dartmouth College, starting this mountaineering program. The First Army in the Department of the Army, so that was good because I had lots of privileges because the Department of the Army was interested in this thing because the only other school they had was Norwich University over at Norwich, Vermont, had a military academy, and they had mountaineering. And this Donald Jennings, who just passed on, he was the instructor over there, and he was in my platoon in Korea. And he was got shot up bad, and then something happened to him, and so he just passed on about 6 months ago. And so I started that program, and that was a great program. The cadets were good, as I mentioned previously. And so then I volunteered Vietnam and couldn't go. And so then that's when I went to Dartmouth, and kids were fantastic at Dartmouth. God, they were just great. And so then when I mentioned previous to you that we ended up being the top school in the East because of the training, the cadets were all the rest of the Corps patterned their program after the mountaineering program. So then I left there and went to Vail, and that was history. And so then I spent nearly 25 years there helping Peter and Parker build a Vail, and now it's becoming the major ski area in North America. And it was a great challenge to me as I look back at my Army career on this whole thing. It was a new challenge, and you wanted to be the best, and it turned out to be the best, not only myself doing it, but being a part of being it. Same way in the Army, the 10th Mountain Division, you're part of a unit that's elite. Same way within Alaska, same way in Europe. It's elite, and it's all patterned, let's face it. It was all patterned after the 10th Mountain Division. All the great northern winter schools up in Alaska, the mountain training centers the Marines have, and the Air Force have a training center now, and it was all patterned after the 10th Mountain Division. This all came out of this. And I think it set an example, and I don't think the 10th Mountain Division will die. If people really want to do it, see it and dig back into it, all these mountaineering schools, the same way at Norwich, Vermont, and the rest of these schools, and are patterned after the 10th Mountain Division. It's not patterned after any other combat unit or any airborne unit or any Marines, because the Marines Training Center was patterned after the 10th Mountain Division, the mountain training centers. And I think that any other schools, the instructors now the cadre out of these schools are picked out from the other part of their service. But the 10th Mountain Division started all these, definitely so.
Good. Anything else?
Do you want to see a film?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.